You are listening to Offensive Lines with Marlon and Boyd. Small stakes NFL gambling for the average fan.
Welcome to Offensive Lines. I'm Marlon.
I'm Boyd.
We're back after a lengthy 3-week hiatus. Boyd went to Florida.
And one April Fool's joke that made my sister sad. Sorry, Jackie, but I just came to me when I was doing it up on Sunday night, and I couldn't resist.
Well, and I think Mitch, he hasn't said anything, but he's called me like 3 times in recent days. I don't know if he was fishing.
That was, I was glad I got somebody. Well, and actually, Rob, that used to work for me, actually Skyped me to find out what was going on. So, I know it didn't get a lot of people, but it made me chuckle that I got a couple of people. So,
Good
and
enough.
It was a great story too, because I put in that our friendship may have been damaged too. It wasn't just the website and the podcast that were going by the wayside. It was a 7-year friendship that started over football. Well, you got to tug at the heartstrings to make it real, right?
Oh, true. And, we could have gone deeper and said it was all about, Titans ending Merriman's career or something. But 3 weeks is as slow as the NFL gets. Really, yeah. We talked about most of the big free agency before we left.
Well, there's been a few moves at quarterback, I guess, that have happened since we were on last. Nothing earth-shattering.
Palmer to Arizona.
Flynn to Oakland. Cobb to Buffalo. So, and Fitzpatrick signing with the Titans to back up Jake Locker. Oh, and where did Hasselbeck sign with the Colts?
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I even missed that one. I confess right now to our listeners, I'm probably out of touch. So I've just been crazy, stupid busy lately.
Well, I didn't see a lot over on holidays either, but I still had Twitter on. And I saw it on the Titans beat reporter on Twitter tweeted that Hasselbeck was going to sign. That he signed with the Colts the day after, because the Titans released him to sign Fitzpatrick, and then the day later he signed with the Colts. So,
okay.
So much for our theory that he was going to coach the Titans or become a coach in the Titans organization after he was done quarterbacking for him. But
I liked our theory, and I still think it might have been a better plan to deal with him.
Well, I still like him he's a class guy. Nothing bad to say about him playing for the Titans.
Not at all. That's not what I was trying to imply.
But... No, I know you weren't, but I'm just saying. Like sometimes when guys leave, it's acrimonious and you think they're an idiot. Nah, he was a class act all the way. I follow him on Twitter. He's just a good guy. He's religious, which isn't my cup of tea, but he's just a good guy. So just say that. Thanks for the service.
Well, and I guess other things, after Doomerville was unable to find a Kinko's in time, he's now signed with the Ravens. An aging guy joining an aging squad that's going to bring in a bunch of rookies. I don't think it's necessarily a terrible idea.
No, they lost their best pass rushers, so they needed somebody to come in. Right? It's like, who'd they have left? They lost Kruger and, Ray Lewis.
You don't even like to speak his name.
Oh, it's going to be awful. He's on ESPN. He's going to be all over ESPN. Sunday,
maybe
Monday.
He'll get a morning talk show eventually.
Now maybe he'll say something stupid like Rush Limbaugh. And they can just get rid of him right away. Or he's as bad as Emmitt Smith was. Emmitt Smith.
Or Bettis is gone now from the booth, isn't he, too? He was one of the worst I ever saw.
Oh, yeah, he was the poster boy for NBC when he retired. And then it was Tiki. And then they finally brought in somebody that could do it, and Rodney, that had an opinion that wasn't trying to keep friends.
And is smooth, too. Rodney's really good in the booth. I like Rodney quite a bit.
Yeah. So, the Doomerville thing happened. Well, and it was ongoing, I think, in the last couple of weeks. We did them back to back. But that was just... Denver didn't want them back. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't shut their fax machine off. This number is no longer in service.
Well, yeah.
Like it freed up cap room.
Well, like and then they tried to sign him at a lower deal, saying, well, because this is so much against the cap. Yeah, the subtext is, I think you're right, that they didn't particularly care to have him back.
No. And that is apparently... Now, I know we're going to get into some Raven stuff here right away, but the whole thing with Ed Reed not going back to Baltimore, Harbaugh didn't want him back. Him and Pollard apparently were the two leaders of that near mutiny in mid-season with the Ravens when all the turmoil was happening. So that's why they're both gone.
Yeah, and, well, I honestly think Ed Reed is very much declining. He was an amazing safety in his day. But if he stays in Baltimore because he's a local hero, you're going to end up paying the hometown bonus versus the hometown discount because simply he's such a figure in the hearts of Baltimore football fans.
And I have nothing against the Titans signing Pollard. He's going to be great.
Do you play New England this year?
I don't care.
I hope you do.
We play 16 other games. And we haven't had anybody that's been feared over the middle, I think, since Blaine Bishop. Because Michael Griffin's an okay safety, but he doesn't scare anybody.
No, I mean, and there aren't many of those safeties left in the league overall. Partially because of the new rules, sort of the new focus. But, I think back to Ronnie Lott, of course, as the guy who absolutely dominated the middle of the field in the secondary. And you did not throw against the Niners in that area of the field.
But nowadays, he'd probably miss half the season every year.
Oh, he'd be suspended maybe 12 games. And it wasn't that he was a dirty player. I'm not trying to imply he's dirty. It's just the rules have changed to such an extent that his style of play and his strengths are simply not allowed in the game anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd be considered the dirtiest player in football.
Yeah.
Like Rodney was. And Rodney didn't play any different than, and that's Harrison, if anybody out there is not familiar. He played the same way Lott did. It was starting to turn then.
It was starting to turn, and part of that was rep, too, because in the days when Rodney was a Charger, which he always should have been, I would be watching, and so many of the flags against him would still be called crap today. Well, it was simply that he had the reputation as a headhunter and an enforcer. And so the receivers were taking dives and overreacting, and the flag would come out. It was absurd watching it in his last years in San Diego.
Look at Cortland Finnegan. When he was with the Titans, he got the reputation of being a shit disturber. And then every time something happened with him, he was to blame. There was always a flag on the Titans if Finnegan was involved. Didn't matter who started it, who finished it, whatever. There was always the Titans getting the 15 yards marched off against them. So, yeah. So,
yeah, I think Pollard's a good signing for the Titans, too.
Yeah, and it's only a 1-year flyer on him anyway, so.
Well, and that's all we're seeing this year, really. But as you said, it's going to be a bit of a Ravens focus in this podcast. Do you want to get the ball rolling, or?
Well, let the listeners know what we're talking about. Brendan Ian-Badejo of the Ravens, a special team player and a very big proponent of gay marriage in the U.S., is claiming he was cut by the Ravens because of his stance on gay marriage. And if that logic holds true, Chris Cluey, the punter for the Vikings, should probably turn in his playbook because he'll be next. Him and Ian-Badejo actually delivered the bill to, was it the courthouse or some legislative body in the U.S. in support of this Gay Rights Act or Gay Marriage Act or something in the U.S.
Yeah, we are from Canada. We're not wildly uninformed. It's just not our country.
Yeah, I don't know how if it was delivered. I can't remember if they delivered it to a court or because I know there's hearings going on right now in the Supreme Court over gay rights and gay marriage. So it could have been that. But they've both written articles in their local papers. They've wrote articles online.
Including a classic by Cluey. The uncensored version is side-splittingly funny.
He's going to be in the media when he's done. He's setting himself up for that.
Oh, absolutely, and why not? And okay, just to keep the ball rolling here, I think we're both big supporters of the position these players have taken. But to imply that you were cut because of that stance is, I don't think you can honestly believe that.
No, but we wouldn't be talking about Ian-Badejo getting cut if he hadn't said it.
Well, yeah, exactly. We probably wouldn't be talking about Ian-Badejo at this stage, period, if it wasn't for his stance.
No, just the statement. Just the statement itself that he was cut for having a stance on gay marriage, a public stance on it. I think that's why we're talking about it, and we wouldn't talk about him because we haven't talked about their stance, him and Cluey, before.
No.
It's just this ludicrous statement. It's like saying he got cut because he's black. Like,
yeah, and there's no evidence
to
support it. He was overpaid for his production at this. He was a very good player. Now he's maybe average. The Ravens cut him for the simple reason that they could sign him or a replacement for probably half or fewer dollars.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well,
this gay thing almost takes something off of his, I think, courageous and valid stance on the gay issue to imply that he is suffering as a result.
Yeah, it detracts from the message.
It's making the message about him and not about who he's ostensibly trying to support and serve.
And that's what bugs me. Like, does he truly believe what he's saying, or was that just publicity?
Was he just attaching himself to that as a button issue to
get his name out there?
Yeah. And I would not have ever implied this until this last statement.
No.
Because I could see no motivation for him at all except that he believes in, rights for all human beings.
Like on special teams, outside of the kickers and the returners, can you name anybody, can anybody name a special teams player from their team? It's usually backups that play. The odd time the teams will have their starters play. I know the Titans, Michael Griffin covers punts and stuff like that, but it's rare in this day and age that you have a guy making $6-7 million playing special teams. It's usually guys you're grooming to take over a spot in a couple of years. You keep them on the roster on special teams. That's how you get your job.
Yeah, or they're truly specialists. They have a limited skill set, but they do one thing very well, which is run headlong down the field, shed blocks through a couple of moves, and have no fear.
Yeah, and it's like, and you're right with Cluey. His stuff is very funny. He's been very outspoken, even more so, I think, than Ian Badejao. Like, Cluey's been on Deadspin. He's had articles.
He's been on The Daily Show. He's
called guys out in articles. He doesn't care on Twitter.
Oh, and he's as obscene as any raucous comic you've seen, and damn near as funny.
Yeah.
I believe he said to, I think it might have been in Maryland, like the Maryland representative, that don't worry, gay rights legislation will not turn you into a rabid cock monster or something to that effect.
Well, and here's the one thought I had with Ian Badejao is he trying to say that he's gay? Is the way he worded it to protect himself from outing himself, but keeping that issue in the forefront? That was the one thing I thought of when I read it the first time.
That didn't even cross my mind. I'm not saying you're wrong, but honestly, that wasn't. I assumed from his statements, which I like. That had never occurred to me.
But why else would you attach that to being cut? Because
he may have said something in anger and pride.
But that would be like saying, well, we're cut. If I said, well, I got fired because I'm a conservative or an NDP or a liberal, or it's like that to me. That would be the same thing. Like for some belief or lifestyle choice.
I think you were closer. It's like saying, yeah, I don't know. I think this was a misstep, and I'm hoping it pans out for him, that his statements are being misinterpreted, that his motives were as valid, whether he's gay or not.
Oh, but he's going to say it.
Matter.
I don't care. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility. Like,
yeah, I hope it comes out, because I appreciated his stance. I enjoyed his stance.
Yeah, but we know
on the issue, and now it looks self-serving.
But we know what he's going to do tomorrow. He'll come out and say his statement was misinterpreted, he was misquoted, or something along those lines.
Well, one thing about this age is we'll be able to see the unedited tape. If it was a trap question and then was presented as something else, someone said, do you think your viewpoints? And he said, well, you know, I might have been a distraction that I didn't want to be in the run-up to the Super Bowl. You know, teams are more likely to cut outspoken players than people who keep their mouths shut and toe the party line. If it was more something like that, and if the situation reveals it to be something like that, I'm not too concerned about his press releases, but
no, but that's what they do now. He's going to do that. He's going to apologize, and it's not what I meant to say, or along those lines, whether it's he says misquoted or they twisted my words, or however the PR people spin it for him. Because I guarantee his agent's working with some PR people right now.
Well, damage control specialists, yeah.
So,
but I mean, does the complete text of the interview exist? I mean, that's about the only way to judge whether someone was baited and trapped.
Yeah, but even if he wasn't baited, he's still going to apologize.
Oh yeah, and I think he should. Because as I implied, suddenly his stance looks self-serving.
Well, it totally did. So I don't know.
I would love to see him sign with the Niners now.
Well, the Niners added Asamoah today too.
I know, on a 0 guaranteed money deal.
He just wants to. Well, the Niners are loaded again.
Oh, they are. Honestly, they intimidate me more this year than last.
Who the hell who's going to beat them?
Seattle?
Maybe.
Like those
Maybe
two teams. I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe the Packers are going to improve on defense.
No.
I think the Niners have to be the odds-on favorite in the NFC. And, Asamoah went to a system in Philly that didn't fit his style of play. The Niners are more basic. I think he's a better fit there.
Yeah, they play man-to-man.
Yeah.
They'll be playing man-to-man. They'll put him out there by himself the whole time. A lot of the time, the Niners play man-to-man.
Yeah, much less zone.
So,
and he'll know his assignment. I think that it's a great move for the Niners, and I can't believe they got him for quite literally nothing.
Yeah, great move.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, winning helps everything. He's not going to sign for nothing with the Browns.
No, and there's probably other teams interested in him, but he wanted to go somewhere where he had a chance to win.
Yeah, and remove this Philly experience where he was an overpaid bust. And now it's up to him. I don't necessarily think it was. I think it was just
They had an O-line. They had an offensive line coaching as a defensive coordinator,
and going into a wide 9 zone thing, like something he'd never played, something that perhaps his skill set didn't even fit.
Or you in a zone you got to make more reads. Man to man, you just line up against the guy and cover him.
Yeah, I'm going to take you out. I mean, Deion Sanders was absolutely great. Do we know if he would at all have fit into a cover 2?
Yeah, maybe not. Like we don't. Yeah, it's the same thing. Any player it's scheme based. Like they always say, is Tom Brady a system quarterback or Montana? Well, you can have all the talent in the world and no scheme or talent around you, and you're not going to be successful. The great coaches fit the scheme to the talents of the players, not the other way around. I'm going to fit this square peg in a round hole because it's my way or the highway.
And
that's
you pursue
where most
the
of these
players
coaches
that fit your overall philosophy, and then you scheme with the players to their skills. You tend to have a philosophy though as a coach. And very few coaches have, utterly gone apostate on what got them there. If you were a passing coach, very few coaches have ever suddenly gone to a run game historically through the entire history of the league.
Well, and if you look at the successful teams, the philosophy doesn't change when the coach changes. Like I'm thinking of the Steelers. They've been linebacker central for 40 fucking years.
Offensively, they change.
Just now, though. Before, it was always power running game.
They keep saying get back to that, but they haven't been a power running game since Roethlisberger came into town. And even Bettis, for most of that, was goal line running. It was red zone running, but not between the 20s.
He was a 1,000-yard rusher his second last year, I think. But regardless,
he was only signed to the team. He was only supposed to be short yardage, and they just had a chain of injuries that led him to that. And I believe the year previous, he had, 200 yards and 14 TDs. I mean, I'm making up those numbers, but they're thematically accurate.
Yes. But they were up until Roethlisberger, even Roethlisberger's first year, he was only throwing the ball 15 to 20 times a game. Now the league's changed. You can't go power running game. You need the power running game in the fourth quarter to run out the clock.
Yeah, but you didn't build your lead with it.
But it's not your base offense. No, but the Steelers have had that same philosophy in defense for as long as I can remember. And they keep producing guys in that defense. In the last 20 years, they just keep rolling linebackers in there in that 3-4.
And mobile, agile linemen.
And they'll run.
And recently, too, by the way. I mean, I think that that's what the Giants did for their recent Super Bowl victories was much from the Steelers.
Yeah.
You had a whole bunch of guys who they had speed at every position. They could play end or linebacker, and they could even cover a tight end. I mean, and you're right. The Steelers have done that for seemingly decades.
Yeah. So that philosophy is, if you can keep it, and that I give credit to the Rooneys, because they hire the similar type coaches with the same mentality defensively. They don't try and bring in somebody that's going to try and reinvent the wheel in Pittsburgh.
And when they hire a coach, they are not hiring you for turn it around in 2 years. If you are a Steelers coach, you are likely working in the same place for a decade. And that's an organizational philosophy.
Yeah, and they draft and acquire players either through free agency or trade that fit that philosophy. They don't go for just the biggest name on the market. They find somebody that fits their scheme. And now with the offense, everybody's going to be passing the ball 35, 40 times a game. It's the only way you can compete when the other 20 teams are. It's like the Edmonton Oilers in football or in hockey in the 80s when they were run and gun. That's why we see numbers like that in the NHL in that time period, because you had to compete. So now when you have great offenses in maybe half a dozen teams over the last 10 years, to compete with them, you had to build up it's almost like a nuclear arms race. You have to keep ratcheting up your own stuff to try and reach the level of the Patriots and what the Rams did in the the late 90s, early 2000s. That was the start of it. Yeah, that was the start of it. If you wanted to beat them, you had to be able to at least compete with them offensively, because you rarely shut them down unless it's Peyton Manning in the playoffs. Would you shut down a great offense? So you have to compete, or you're not going to win enough games to even get in the playoffs. Now, in the playoffs, it seems if you have a special defense, you can win with it, like the Giants did. But you look at the teams around the league that are successful, their defenses are awful. The two teams in the Super Bowl didn't have great defenses this year.
No, but the Ravens had great defense in the playoffs, with the exception of that Denver game, where I still don't understand how they got out of there. I guess that's Peyton in the playoffs again, as he said. But the Ravens' defense, while a below average to poor unit most of the year, was unbelievable in the playoffs. And you can even take that back to
but how unbelievable?
Patriots Super Bowl, where that defense was all over the place, switched from a 43 to a 34 in midfield, was running a nickel half the time, and then they faced the Rams, and that defense was absolutely astonishing.
No, but they cheated there.
Well, they... We'll get to that. That's still coming.
I know, but I wanted just, with that little segue, I wanted to just... With me being gone and everything, we've been teasing this.
Oh, I've been ducking you.
We've been teasing this book we've both read about, written by a fan, kind of like how we do our podcast, about the Patriot cheating scandal and his conspiracy theory on it, which is what I'll call it, to put it mildly. And we're going to do it, but we didn't have a lot of time tonight to do a long podcast, so...
And it was free. our previous ones, it was free agency period. This one we can run in May, and it'll be as the same thing as it would be if we ran it now.
Yeah, so. I just wanted to let people know because we've teased it like the last 3. The next week's going to be the Patriot thing. So I just wanted to let them know we haven't forgot it. We're going to do it. We've actually avoided talking about it in our personal life because we want to save it for the podcast.
Keeps threatening me though. Like,
I've got 4 pages of notes, dude.
I'm ducking you like Holmes ducked Tyson.
Well, he didn't duck enough because he got the fuck out.
Well, he tried strongly to avoid that fight.
That's coming, and I'm hoping next week we can get it where we have a night where we have enough time.
Next podcast,
because I'm thinking it's going to be an hour to an hour and a half to do it.
Oh, it's going to get bloody. It's gonna get a little bit gory.
Well, speaking of getting gory, we know the concussion lawsuit is out there looming, and I believe it took a huge hit today. A huge hit. I don't know if it'll pan out that way, but Pat White, who was drafted by the Dolphins to be kind of like a quarterback like we're seeing now, only he was drafted like 5 years too early for the offenses that are being run now, because he was along the lines of an RG3. And who's the other guy I'm thinking of?
Oh, well, Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, Cam Newton.
Is that type of quarterback in college at West Virginia, and the Dolphins drafted him with that in mind, and it just, whether it was the coach didn't know how to run that type of offense, or they were trying to run the Wildcat with them.
That's what I was just going to bring up, was instead of running sort of a pure read option, they decided to tart it up as the Wildcat, which is truly a gimmick offense.
Yes. So he has now signed a 1-year deal with, back it up a little bit. He joined the concussion lawsuit with 4,000 other ex-players and said he had depression and memory loss and mental anguish and all these other lawyer words for brain injury. And lo and behold, he signs a 1-year contract with the Redskins and withdraws from the lawsuit. How bad are your head injuries if you'll sign a 1-year contract to be a third-string quarterback?
Well, because the lawsuit will take 30 years to resolve itself.
I know.
And I think many of these people involved. Now, I want to make the distinction between the legitimate damages done in the period when the NFL knew what was going on and covered up the information.
They didn't cover up any information. I don't think they covered up information. Who had it? Where were the doctors doing independent studies? They're all blaming it an NFL conspiracy, but where were the doctors with the hard evidence that said this is what's happening? That's been like the last 5 years.
Well, yeah, and I believe in that period when the NFL did release a thing saying it was not dangerous, there's legitimate there.
That was before that. The whole thing, that was late 90s when they said that. There's no proof that concussions are a danger and all that stuff. That was like 98, 99.
But that's an absurd statement by itself. Once the NFL said that, because obviously anyone knows that ramming your head repeatedly into a wall is going to hurt your brain. For the NFL to say there's no evidence, they fell into the tobacco trap. Right? You cannot deny it, and to go on record as denying that there's a correlation, I mean, it would have made more sense to me if they had come out and said then that, yes, obviously there are risks involved in this game. There is also massive compensation involved in this game.
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
Leave it to the individual to determine whether the compensation is worth the risk.
Well, that's the guys that do the oil drilling in the middle of the ocean on the platforms.
Well, that's always been my example. Or the divers who fix that shit.
Like
that's,
they
I
the
believe,
risk,
the most lethal profession on earth.
But they make like how much an hour or whatever they get paid, like thousands of dollars an hour because they're taking the risk.
Exactly, and I believe it should be that way unless the employer is covering up the inherent risks.
Or not.
If the risks are stated, but the NFL stating there is no evidence to prove, that's where they fucked up.
No, but there wasn't, though. There wasn't that link to long-term brain issues. There wasn't. There was no studies. There was no... They hadn't diagnosed this CTE. There was none of this stuff.
Well,
That's
by the
been
way,
the last
I mean,
decade
the diagnosis of the
most.
CTE, all of this, I mean... It didn't used to be that everyone, or 70% of all human beings, suffered from mental illness either. Just because a syndrome has been identified doesn't necessarily make it real.
No, but I'm just saying, like...
You know, the description of personality disorders, like, even the fact that they're saying CTE exists... Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Like, I'm not buying. There seems to be new diseases and new brain syndromes every day. Could just be
I agree.
People are variant and fucked up.
Well, I agree, but and the thing is, you don't know all the damage to the brain wasn't caused in the NFL either. These guys have played football since fucking Pop Warner.
Well, and we just talked about Rodney Harrison, who had a reputation as a headhunter, a vicious player, a man who played over the middle of the field and played bigger than his size. He is really articulate, well-spoken, fast on his feet mentally.
Code words.
Oh, right, because he's black. No. No, I was speaking in announcers. And by the way, as a variant, I would use,
Emmett Smith?
You know, no, I was just thinking about the 30-odd idiotic white guys I have to listen to, including that ex-Pittsburgh quarterback. What's that guy? Couldn't spell cat if you spotted them, the C and the A.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I know.
I'm just saying Rodney Harrison, who played that position as physically as anyone has in the last 25 years, doesn't look to me to be a brain-damaged individual.
Well, look at Dick Butkus. Like, for all the 4,000 that are in the lawsuit, I could bring up 4,000 guys that don't have an issue.
Well, and they're saying, they have depression. Well,
who doesn't?
If you take the test for fucking depression, everyone is depressed.
At some point.
Exactly. It's like, does it ever feel like life is futile? Yeah, it happened Tuesday morning. It happened to everyone.
Yeah,
sometime this week where you're just going, oh, fuck. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah, Monday afternoon for me. And, no, I'm not trying to make light of...
No, and neither am I.
Brain injuries. That's not our point. It's when guys do stuff like this to me, like when Pat White says, I need to be compensated because of the injuries I suffered playing football. And then to jump right back in when somebody offers you a contract, it throws the whole legitimacy of these players that are in the lawsuit. And I'm not saying the guys that are 60 years old. I'm talking about the guys that are 35 that have joined in this lawsuit. It kills their legitimacy.
It absolutely destroys it. And for the legitimate victims, well, and again, I still think it's a personal decision. I mean, for any of these players to say that they were doing this believing there was not risk involved, it's just ridiculous. It beggars belief.
No, so does this thought just occurred to me. Could this be used as a preamble to, I don't know, as a fallback for money issues down the road? Wasn't in my right mind, had brain injuries, giving them leeway with their personal responsibilities, used as a defense in certain instances?
I think it's more, it's they were just contacted, life ain't great, someone says, oh, you might get $100,000, if you sign on to this lawsuit. It costs you absolutely nothing, you only have to pay fees if we reach a settlement.
Oh no, I get all that.
So they'll sign up. I mean, some of them, yeah, maybe.
Will somebody use that as a defense at some point for their money woes? Because we know 80% of pro athletes go broke within a few years of leaving their profession. So, is this going to be? Well, I
don't see the advantage that would give them. You're broke, or
yes, but if
once you're broke, you're broke.
No, but
so
if you
it doesn't really matter how you got there.
Well, it does, because you can use the defense of I wasn't of sound mind when I was making these financial decisions.
That's a possibility, I suppose.
Fuck, there's been stupider arguments made in court than that.
Well, that's true. I mean, possibly yes, but I mean, your original point that this hurts
McMahon's
the
using it right now, though. McMahon's been using it, I believe, Jim McMahon. And that he was part of some bank in Chicago that's being sued.
Oh.
And he was like, well, I was just a figurehead. I can't even concentrate. I didn't know what I was doing. Because he's on the lawsuit for people that lost boatloads of money at this bank.
Okay, yeah, and we talked about this earlier. It just slipped my mind.
So it's been used once. Are we going to see that? Are people attaching this to this lawsuit with designs down the line of using this as a defense as well in other financial issues? I'm just throwing it out there, but I can see it happening more than just with Jim McMahon.
Yeah, I think in most of these thousands of people, it's just you have to put up no money. We're offering you a pie-in-the-sky payout, or at least a payout for absolutely none of your own compensation. It's like picking up a lottery ticket that blows by you. I don't think the motivations of most of these players are that sinister or well thought out.
No, here's another thing that just popped into my head. Is this just another way of the players that couldn't get anything from the league with the old timers lawsuit? With no health benefits and everything, is this just another way to try and get that into court? We'll put it as concussions.
Well, here's the thing about the concussions thing too. I think it's hurting the far more legitimate lawsuits of the older players who were not financially compensated correctly and were, in fact, put out on the field by doctors who worked for the team who had absolutely no regard for what was actually happening to the player.
Yeah, but that's the same in
many of these concussion lawsuits just seem...
I think it's a way of getting this back into court, because all those cases of the retired players trying to get benefits and everything from the league now were thrown out. This is just another avenue to get it back in. Because I could almost guarantee you everybody that was in those first lawsuits is involved in this one.
Yeah. And maybe to wrap up at this point, because we're starting to swirl around here.
Starting to leak.
Pro Football Talk also found 2 other players who, while current plaintiffs in the concussion lawsuit, signed with football teams and played with football teams while being attached to the lawsuit. Romberg, who played for the Falcons in 2011, and Patrick Chukwara, who played for the Seahawks last season.
See, they're killing it.
Yeah, they're ruining it for all, really. If there was legitimacy to the lawsuit, they are cutting it.
It would be like somebody that sued the tobacco companies because saying smoking ruined their life, and then going, well, I just took a job with the tobacco company. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So, I think my final thought on this isn't going to see the light of day. I don't see anything how they're going to prove willful negligence on the part of the owners.
No, they cast too wide a net, and there are too many different class action lawsuits, and the NFL is arrogant and moneyed enough that people who thought they could reach a settlement, which would only ever get to the lawyers anyway, none of the people who signed on with these class action things ever actually receive a benefit, and they just maybe picked the wrong opponent. The NFL can drag this on for 30 years
and not lose.
Run dry.
Yeah, not lose a bit of sleep over it. But
no, though. I mean, we're not saying there's no legitimacy to any of the claims. I just think that it's a rarity. I question the scale of what this has become.
Yeah, and I do as well. And you can't have a legitimate case and keep going back to work for the same employers you're saying are trying to get you killed. So that's about all for that. I didn't have anything else to add.
No, I think that's about all for this week.
All right. So
if you don't mind, I just want to throw in one thing. A friend of ours can't do much other than listen to things right now, so I just want to send out an offensive lines. Hope things went well to our friend Kelly.
Yeah, take care, Kelly.
And hope everything went well today. I'm going to try to get a hold of you tomorrow.
All right. So if you're like Kelly and you like listening to our podcast, you can check it out on iTunes. Just search Offensive Lines, or you can listen to it directly from our website, offensivelines.ca. Follow us on Twitter for any updates to the website or when new podcasts are available. It's at Offensive Lines, or on Facebook.com/Offensive Lines. And if you want to contact our show, just email offensivelines@shaw.ca. I'm Boyd.
I'm Marlon. And next week, it gets bloody. Or next podcast, it gets bloody.